God is always at work. He was at work through that whole Christmas story. But like the innkeeper said, it was an amazing thing that God allowed him to play a small part in something much bigger. And that's a question for you. Are you going to allow God to use you to play just a small part in His grander plan of 2020? There's a really important passage of Scripture found in John chapter 5. We're going to put up that verse on the screen. And the context for John 5 is Jesus is in Jerusalem because it's a feast. So he's gone there, and he happens to go to the pool of Bethesda, and that's a real place. Archaeologists have excavated that. And he goes to the pool of Bethesda, and there's many crippled people there, infirm people, blind people there. And he comes upon a man who's been crippled for 38 years, and he's longed to be healed. And Jesus comes to him and asks him a pretty elementary question: do you want to be well? And the man says, well, how can I? I have no one to take me to the waters, the healing waters of Bethesda. And instead of carrying him into those waters, Jesus just commands the illness to be gone. And he tells the man, be well, take up your mat and walk. And that's what the man does. And it was a miracle. Well, the problem was that happened on a Saturday, on a Sabbath day. And so the religious community started yipping and yapping about Jesus and condemning him and criticizing him. He cannot be from God if he's healing on the Sabbath. There's no work that should be done on the Sabbath. And he healed him. That's work. And to all of this, Jesus gives us a foundational principle that you need to know, and it's in John 5:17. Jesus said to them, my Father is always at His work to this very day, and I too am working. Why is that so foundational? Because we've got to grasp this truth for our daily lives, that everywhere you go, God's at work. The grocery store, your office, your school, your community. Everywhere you go, God is showing up and He's at work. And Jesus was saying, I also am at work, even on a Sabbath day, even on a holy day, in church, out of church. I'm always at work. So our job as we wake up in the morning is to invite God into our world and tell Him that we're going to be looking for Him to be at work, and that we're brave enough to join Him in His work. So I want you to hear some testimonies, some interviews actually, and if the four of you who will be speaking will move up here, and I will remember to get the microphone this time, and if you guys will join me, and we'll kind of take the theme of God at work. And as I thank you, Pastor Jeff, and as I joked with them last hour, the theme is where they saw God at work in 2019. So every time they use that phrase, last hour it was 100 points, I think. This hour it's 1,000 points. 1,000 points when you mention God at work. So we'll start in, and we're going to do this chronologically and kind of just review the year. And the point of this, church, is this is supposed to apply to you. So when you hear their words, think about your life and your circumstances, all right? And they will be the preachers this morning. So Samantha Ott, Sam, tell us, we'll start at the beginning of the year, so along about the end of February into March, we had all this snow piled up and freezing and thawing and turned into ice, and then we had a bunch of rain, and then the Army Corps of Engineers let a bunch of water down from South Dakota. And so tell us about what happened. We had about 6 families or so who lost their homes and lost everything in this flood. So kind of tell us about your journey there.
At the end of February, Doreen and I moved into a place at Paradise Lakes. We were there for about 3 weeks. On March 15th, we had come back to the home, and we were given 25 minutes to pack what we needed and to get out because the flood was coming. Not very much time. We didn't take a whole lot, but we didn't believe it would go in the house either. We believed we had plenty of room before it would ever hit inside. On March 17th, we learned that our house had water in it, and it was rising. 3 weeks later, we were allowed back in, and we were able to salvage Doreen and I about what would fit in a 5x5 storage unit. But during this whole time, one of our parishioners, Liz, allowed us to come live with them, made us a part of her family. The church stepped up, and we seen God at work as people brought meals to help out with that. People donated clothes and money to help us along, to get back on our feet. We had people praying for us, helping us through this difficult time. In May, the week of Mother's Day, I got another blow that housing market was really hard to find places. And I had just found out that I was not going to get another house, that I had lost the bid. And I remember crying on my way home from work, and I was just pretty disappointed. And at that time, Ellen called me and said that another parishioner was moving. Kathy Cummings and her family were moving from here to Texas, and they weren't going to take all their furniture. And she would like Doreen and I to come, and at a greatly reduced amount, we could purchase some furniture. And as we talked, she had a sleep number bed. Now, the thing about the sleep number bed is what I had before the flood. When I had priced them, I knew I was never going to be able to replace that. It was just too much money. So to me, when she said she had one that I could purchase at a rate that I could afford, that was like God saying, I still got you. Mm-hmm. I'm still working. Mm-hmm. On Friday, I discovered that I had put in another bid on a house, and I got that one. Saturday morning, I went through and was able to furnish most of my house for $1,200, which isn't very much money considering all of what I got. I came to church that morning, and there were more things that I needed, and different parishioners from this church provided it. So God restored. He restored me with a home. He restored me with furniture. He worked through people in this church to help me along that journey. He was faithful. He was there. I may not have always known where he was leading me, but he was there, and he shined out in this church, and I'm very thankful for that.
So, real quickly, I asked you last hour, through all of this, what did it do for your spiritual journey with God and your growth? How was that strengthened through these terrible things you went through?
Well, it strengthened me in patience. I'm not always the most patient person, and I had to be during these 3 months. The other thing was Doreen had bought some Bible studies, and she gave me one on peace, finding peace amidst tragedy and turmoil, finding God's peace. And it was really helpful to me to try to find that when everything was so up in the air. The other thing that I learned is that I have a church family, and I really appreciate that.
Amen. Good. All right, pass it down to Casey Mallow. Casey, I've asked her to share about her journey of saying yes, even when it was scary. So tell us about all that and how God worked.
So this summer, I had the opportunity to work as a camp counselor with the organization called Eagle Lake. We've had it here at our church for a good few years, but it's stationed in Colorado, and then they have groups of people that go out across like a good part of the country, and so that's what I got to do. So I was able to travel to around Colorado and then around Missouri, And what we did was we set up a day camp there, and it was a different city and a different church each week. And during the camp day, we got to have dance parties. We got to play games with the kids. We had Bible studies with them, and just love on the kids, let them have a safe space to be a kid, and also to teach them the gospel and show them the love of God. So, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what was one significant event where you saw God kind of show up and work?
Yeah. I saw God working the entire summer. There was a lot of instances where it just was phenomenal. But one specific example was the last week of camp. We were in a city in Missouri, and there was kind of a rougher part of town near the church that we were at. And so me and a couple other counselors were asked to go visit that community and invite them to come to the camp. The church that we were with, it was actually a group of churches from that community. They kind of rallied together to help be able to put on camp for that week and to provide the number of kids that were needed and the money to afford it. And so they had scholarships that they could give to these kids. And so we went around and we were telling just families around that area about that. And a lot of people said they were able to come. So that was super exciting. And then the next day when we went to go pick them up and bring them to camp, there was only 2 kids that were able to come. And so that was a little discouraging, but throughout the week, I just felt obligated to just go in and check on the kids and just ask them how they were doing. And by the end of the week, one of the girls, she told me that this was like a week that she would never forget, and that she just had a blast. So that just to me was super reassuring and just reminded me why I was there, and that I was on mission for God.
All right, so Casey, I know you, and this isn't your favorite thing to be up here on stage and talking in front of people. So how was it that you decided you were going to give up your summer and money-making opportunities as a college student, right? And you were going to go and travel around to places you've never been and be with people you didn't know and be put on the spot day after day after day. How did that happen?
Okay, so to be honest, I didn't think about a lot of that before before going there. I don't know. I think obviously the big thing was I was not going to be able to afford it, not make a lot of money. But to me, I don't know. It was really intimidating and scary just to think about all of the specifics of everything. But I don't know. I kept praying about it and just talking to God and just seeing if that was right for me. And I honestly hoped that maybe God would be like, no, it's okay, don't do it. But that was not the answer. So I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And I was just kind of one of those why not kind of things, why not just go and do it. It was amazing. Some of it was scary and intimidating to meet a bunch of strangers and just be with those people all summer. But I don't know, from everything, a lot of relationships grew and just God worked in my life personally, and I got to see Him work in other people's lives. So, yeah.
Amen. That's good. So there's the sermon, right? How many of you are brave enough, like Casey, to say, why not? Why not me? Why don't I step up and do something out of my comfort zone in 2020? So thanks for preaching that. That's good. So pass it down to Matt Collins, and he led a team from our church to go to Honduras and serve there. So tell us what you saw there as far as God being at work.
Yeah, so last July I was able to lead a team of 10 people from our church to join up with a team of 30 people from Detroit and Louisiana to go down to Guayamaca, Honduras. And it was an amazing time. We were able to minister to a lot of different people, to give medical treatment to a lot of different people. Just seeing what God was doing in the hearts of the Hondurans and in the hearts of our 10 people was an awesome experience. I have 2 stories, maybe 3, that I want to talk about. And the first one was one of our people was having a hard time raising the funds. And so we're going again in July this year, and the trip cost about $2,000. And so that's a lot of money to raise, and one person was having some trouble raising that amount of money, and they were confiding with me, and I was like, you know what? God's good. God will take control. God will provide. And just as the summer went on, as the time got closer, another member of the team got more than enough. And so I was contacted by Pastor Hicks, and he's like, hey, so-and-so got more than enough, so this other person's not being able to cover, so we want to gift it to that person. And it was an awesome feeling for me to be able to be used to go to that person and say, hey, guess what? God provided. And so here's some money for you, and now you're paid in full. And so I just want to tell you that if you are thinking about going on a trip, but the finances are a hindrance, God will provide. He always does. I've done many trips and have never had an issue to where God has not given through fundraising, through donations, through just support, the amount. If he's calling you to go, he's going to provide. The other way that I've seen that God has worked was actually through Caitlin. Caitlin Harris she stepped out in faith. She was with a group of two other ladies and myself and a guy interpreter, and they asked the three ladies, the guy interpreter and myself, to go kind of be their bodyguard. The missionaries that work in Honduras at the hospital, the guy, Chris, he was a former well driller. And so he drilled at the hospital 3 wells that he chlorinates the water, he makes it pure, and they are the only place in Guayamaca that has fresh water that you can actually drink and shower and do all that stuff with. And so they have it set up to where there's two faucets outside of the compound that anybody in Guayamaca can come to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and get fresh water. And so on Sunday after church, we went and had a big tanker truck. They filled this up with water, and we went into one of the small villages, small towns, and there were hundreds of kids and hundreds of adults running beside this tanker truck and running beside this bus, knowing that we were there to give them water. And it was very humbling, because we as Americans, we just go to the faucet, turn it on, and take our glass, put it in the refrigerator, and we get our drinks. We don't think about it. We go to the gym, we put our bottles inside this automatic water dispenser. We don't think about it being a life source. And these Honduran people, they saw the truck and they said, I'm going. And so they would bring buckets. They would bring containers, just anything they could get their hands on to fill up with water and carry back to their houses. And so Caitlin was going back with these 2 other ladies, myself and Luis, to this house to minister, and she did an awesome job stepping out of her comfort zone, working for God, ministering, going through the gospel with these ladies in this household. And I was standing back just kind of watching, because I was a bodyguard, right? And I saw this guy. He walked across the street to a little patch of trash, and he picked up a bottle, kind of like this. It was dirty, filled with trash, filled with mud. He blew it up, shook all the stuff out that he could, and he took it to the truck to go get water in. And at that moment, it kind of broke me and said, we got to do something. So I was talking to Bobby Parks, who's the leader down in Louisiana, and what we're going to do is we're going to raise money so we can buy 5-gallon buckets, so when we go out on that Sunday, we can give buckets for them so they can fill up with their water. They can use these buckets after they use their water for other things that are useful to them. And so we're going to give them not only living water, like life water, but we're also going to give them the water that Christ provides, the living water of their soul. And so it was really purposeful to go down there. It was really meaningful to be able to impact these people with this water. And so I challenge you guys, when we have that, to donate and to say, you know what, I want to buy a bucket. And the last thing I was going to say is, I was talking to my mom a couple weeks ago, and I said, God has used me a lot this year through the choir program, through teaching FBU, through playing guitar over here, Why? Why is God using me? Through my ups and my downs, my failures and my mistakes, why is God using me to do all this? And her response was simple, because you're willing.
Mhm.
And so to answer your question, why not me? If you are willing, God will send you. If you are willing, God will take you wherever he wants you to go, but you have to be willing to do it.
Amen. All right. So, Sherry Vossen, your story is a little bit different, and it involves China and adoption and illness and surgeries and miraculous answer to prayer. So, tell us about that.
So those of you who know us know that our 2 youngest children are adopted from China, and I'm going to do a disclaimer quick. They're in here this hour. They weren't last hour, so I might cry now because they're looking at me. But the process of adoption was one that God clearly called us to. He made it extremely obvious that that was what we were meant to do. And going to China and seeing God when we were there in a place that it's very forbidden to talk about Christ, but our very first guide when we landed in Beijing was a Christian, and she had a little picture of Jesus hanging from her car. And so just to have someone in a country where nobody talked like us be able to pray with us was just amazing. And we have seen God working every day since we have gotten these 2 kids. And if you don't know them, I encourage you to get to know them. They're amazing little humans. But we've seen God working a lot this year, particularly through Emma, our youngest daughter. She has spina bifida. And something I didn't mention last hour was we knew God was working in her life from the minute we got back to America. The doctors in China assured us that she would never walk. And we took her, to doctors here, and the orthopedists here were like, well, we just need to get her the right braces, and I think there's hope. And sure enough, we got her properly fitting AFOs, and 2 days later, she was running, and has never stopped since. So Emma has had 9 or 10 surgeries now since she's been home with us, and every single time has just come out higher than expected, better than expected, faster than expected, and everybody is always amazed, and all the doctors at Children's love her. They all know her. She's their favorite patient. She had surgery in September 5th, to straighten out one of her feet, and this was the first time that we actually hit a bit of a road bump. Emma developed a horrible infection under her cast, and it went very deep, got into the bone. She developed MRSA, and the healing took a lot longer than was anticipated. We were kind of told 4 weeks in a cast, 2 weeks in a walking boot, and you're back to yourself. And she was basically in a wheelchair from September 5th until recently. And she had a surgery about 2 weeks ago to remove the hardware in her leg because it had gotten infected. And the orthopedic surgeon did not give us a ton of hope, and told us that the bone hasn't had a lot of time to heal, and we really just hope that it's healed enough that we don't have to put a new plate in, that maybe we can get away with just cross pins, because then we won't have to go back in 6 weeks and retake out the plate. But we'll have to see. I'm going to have a plate in there with me when I go into the operating room, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. One thing you need to know before I finish the story is I was having a pretty decent crisis of faith through a lot of this. I started to ask a lot of why. Why is this little girl who has been through more than most of us have in her 7 short years, why is she having to go through one thing after another? And that's really what it felt like since September. And thankfully, my friends here and our pastors just kept assuring me, you have to give the control to God. You are trying to control this. God is in control, not you. And I am stubborn, and I didn't want to believe that. And so my word that kept coming up was just surrender to God. And I had a really hard time. But before this last surgery, I finally got it. And I did, and I surrendered. And I reached out to a bunch of people at church, and I said, guys, this is a big surgery. They're taking the plate out. We need this bone healed. We need this infection gone. So when the surgeon came out, they had told me about 2 hours, and 45 minutes after they started, they came out with smiles on their faces. And the orthopedic surgeon said, I don't know what to tell you. The bone is completely healed. We didn't have to put pins in. And I just smiled, and she said, why are you smiling? And I said, because that is what we ask people specifically to pray for.
Amen.
And I knew that God did that. And was able to share with the doctors. And a week later, she was given permission to get out of her wheelchair. So,
Amen. All right. Give that prayer.
she is an amazing little person.
It's all right.
And if you don't know her, I encourage you all to meet her.
Amen. All right. So, lots of messages there. God's healing power, the role of the local church, the beauty of adoption and foster care, and how God works mightily through that. But thanks, guys, for sharing just little vignettes of how God worked in your life and how you saw Him work through others in 2019. Why don't you thank them for being up here? Well, one other hugely important verse that relates to God at work is simply this. It's Ephesians 2:10. And it talks about that you are His work. You are. It isn't just abstract stuff. Oh, He moves here, He does this. It's you. You are His workmanship. That's what it says. You are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And I wish we had time to break that down and look at the original Greek language of workmanship. It means a poem. You are a poem that He is creating and has created. He's wordsmithing you. It's a picture of embroidery that God is weaving. Anyway, you are that workmanship. And what charges me is that in the year 2020 coming up, there is works that He has created for you to do. Good works. And He's planned them. He's prepared them. The table is set for you to step out and say, why not me? Right? And be willing to be used by God in one of those works in 2020. And maybe it's not going to be going to Honduras. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not going to be going somewhere else on a mission trip, a short-term church mission trip, but maybe it is. Maybe it's something rolling up your sleeves and serving around here in children's ministry or youth ministry or helping out in some way. Maybe it's having the confidence to start inviting people to church. Maybe it's to join God in His kingdom and supporting it financially in 2020. Maybe it is having the confidence to say, why not me? I've got this circle of friends who have no faith at all. They're not Christ followers. They have no church. I'm going to start building a relationship with them to earn the right to tell them my story about why I believe in God, why I've trusted Christ. So what is it going to be in 2020? And that's the question. What steps, concrete action steps, will you take in 2020 to allow God to work through your life? And so that's a question for you to think about, to pray about, to ask God. But I'm convinced of this, that He's going to work through LifeSpring Church in an amazing way in 2020. And that means, if that's the case, it's going to be through you, through your lives. Ordinary lives, my ordinary life. Fallible, yes, but I'm willing to say, why not me? And I invite you to join me in that simple declarative statement of faith. Why not me? So let me pray for you. Father, I pray for these in front of me, boys, girls, teens, university students, adults. God, that we all would be able to step across the line in 2020 and say, why not me? God, I give myself to you. May we look for you to be at work. May you change lives. And I pray right now in our service, God, that if there's anyone here who's never stepped across the line of faith, that they would step across that line and say, why not me as a Christian, as a Christ follower? I don't have to be good enough. I don't have to clean myself up. Lord Jesus, come into my life, forgive me my sins, and you make me the person you want me to be. It's your power, not mine. So I yield myself to you. In Jesus' name, amen.